to the Alan Reinhart Show. I am coming to you from Parts Unknown, which is basically a random motel room in New England, as I am on my meandering journey after a terrific race down at Cecil County over the weekend, and then a couple of days just to meander up this direction. And I'm doing the event in Epping this weekend, and really looking forward to that. Joined as always by the lovely and talented Nicole Clark, coming to us from her office. Did things smooth out today? This morning sounded like you were having a bit of a difficult day.
Yes, it's a lot. TV life is a lot, and for me, it's my busy season right now because I'm the person who does all the fall scheduling and new shows and all that. So it's my busy time. But the nice thing I had nice little visitors a little bit ago. Erica Enders and Courtney Enders, and of course, social media and Alec, they were all in here. Yep, there they are. They were just in here, and I was so busy, and all of a sudden my buddy's like, "Hey, don't you know that lady?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do know them." So it was nice. We just had them in the studios promoting the U.S. Nationals coming up.
Yes, and Courtney is getting big. She's 2 months away, a month away?
And I think she's due like the same time as the Dallas race, which I'm just like, no, that's your race. But yeah, so then we have Mackenzie, and then we have Erica, and that's our anchor, Stacey. And of course, Allie Bland, we love her here. She brought Sean in a couple weeks ago too, so we love having them in the studio promoting NHRA. And we're going to our team is going to be out at the U.S. Nationals, so very excited about that.
Very cool. I'll be there for a couple of things too, but we'll get to that a little bit later on in Hot Topics. And speaking of which, unfortunately, we start off this week with a bit of sad news. Bob Vandergriff passed away, who's
senior.
Bob Jr.'s father, and Jordan's grandfather. He was an industry tycoon, ran a lot of different businesses, and was very involved in the aftermarket, was very involved, obviously, on the racetrack, both, instrumental in getting his son and his grandson introduced to the sport. And just a sad day that Bob Vandergriff Sr. has passed away, but definitely want to send all of our best wishes and positive energy to the family, because it's a difficult time. No matter how prepared you think you are, it's a difficult time.
Yes, and I work closely. I actually took this picture. I've worked closely at the Vandergriff since like 13 or 14, and Bob Sr. was just always so nice to me. He's just such a nice guy. Loves his family. He's a family first kind of guy. So yeah, my heart just goes out to Bob, Kevin, Jordan, Gina, everybody. So yes, it's a shame.
A difficult time, but Father Time does remain undefeated.
Yes. So our thoughts are going out to the whole Vandergriff family.
And mine as well. Well, there was some good news, however, that came through the last week. I mentioned the race down in Cecil County. We had threat of weather coming in on Sunday, so we actually ended up finishing that thing up Saturday night. It was about 1:30 in the morning or so when the last couple of cars went down. But Testo Sports Nationals, so we got to run class eliminations for both stock and super stock. And a tip of the cap to Mark Dawson, literally, who, even though we knew we were going to have an abbreviated schedule and be pushing, ran class to conclusion. In a situation like that, it's pretty easy to just pick the low qualifier guy and go, okay, give him the trophy and let's go. We got a lot of stuff to do here. But he wanted to go through, make sure everybody had their fair shot. So that was pretty cool. And like I say, it ended up being a long night. But since it did end up raining most of the day on Sunday, it definitely ended up being the right decision. And of course, double divisional at your place, right? Brainerd had a rocking weekend last weekend.
Yeah, because Sarah Walker, my bestie, she's the GM. I was talking with her all weekend, and yeah, it was a busy weekend for them. NHRA's been out there track prep, and that's what they've been doing today. But yeah, it was a great weekend for them. They had great weather. We also had stuff going on down here at IRP. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Brainerd track. It's women run, the GM, the owner, the operations, and so Sarah, Stephanie, and Christy have just been nailing it, and they did a great job last weekend. And they're being invaded today with more.
Yeah, the zoo officially getting opened up, right? When it's like the land rush.
My DHR zoo crew shirt from
and maybe our old buddy Kuhar, who was well, he was like the grand poobah of the Drink Hard racing team out there. You talk about a guy that took his job seriously. He definitely did that.
Now Donnie kind of rolls on with that. So But yeah, they're getting ready for the zoo, so it's going to be a great weekend for them.
Well, I hope they have good weather up there. They've got a lot of interesting stuff up there. Matter of fact, in the alcohol classes, I got a couple of interesting things. One thing, Mitch Coletta going to be making his national event debut, and they're doing a little bit of a throwback paint scheme. Mitch, for those who don't know, I assume pretty much everybody's heard by now, that is Doug's son, who is at least taking, dipping his toe in the family tradition. Doug can't do this forever, obviously, and so who knows? Is this going to be the start of the next generation of Coletta Top Fuel? I think it's been pretty well established that the team is going to continue on even after Doug retires from driving. They still plan on keeping and running the cars and doing the program, but it sure would be nice to still have somebody named Coletta on the racetrack. And if it's going to be Mitch, then a tip of the cap to Mitch. And there's also another alcohol dragster that's going to be making an appearance up there that I think is going to get a lot of attention just because people are going to go, what exactly is that?
It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a dubbing car. It's kind of a funster design, front engine, obviously, but instead of the driver sitting all the way back on top of the differential where you would in a conventional front engine dragster, basically funny car cage, funny car driver compartment, the rear end off behind, and it's going to be different. It's an injected nitro car, as you can see from the pictures, and this will be the NHRA debut, I do believe. So I think there's going to be a lot of people in the staging lanes wandering by and taking a really close look at that thing before it hits the track.
And I don't know if Dubbins are running too, because I know Kirk Wolf usually drives them, and I don't know if that's what he's driving this weekend. So I'm like, okay, that's different, a little bit of something.
We'll just have to keep our eyes on the qualifying list when they get started. Well, let's see what else is going on. Hot topic. Oh, the Sox and Martin Hemi shootout. Coming back to Indy in just a couple of weeks. And yeah, I am going to be there. Mike McCandless, Herb McCandless' son, who is the guy who kind of put the program together, got the funding and financing and everything in place, reached out to me. And I'm going to be in the neighborhood anyway. I'm doing the Bowling Green event the weekend before, and I had planned to come up to Indy just to touch base with some guys that I don't see as regularly as I used to. And so Mike reached out and he said, hey, man, I'd love to have you come do maybe some social media, maybe do some tech stuff on the cars in the pits, do that kind of thing. So I won't be in Indy officially working like in my old capacity, but I will certainly be there at least for the beginning of the weekend. And the Hemi cars are just spectacular, right? I mean, if you are a Chrysler guy, I got an idea. What's the biggest motor we got? The 426 Hemi. What's the lightest car we got? Well, we've got the Darts and we've got the Barracudas, and will it fit? No. So he called George Hurst and said, "Can you make it fit?" He said, yes. The legends were born. A 1 year only. But if you're planning to go to Indy and you've never been there when they run the Sox and Martin Hemi Challenge, just listening to Herb McCandless tell the stories. I mean, he's the guy that won Indy in 1970 in one of those cars. One of those cars was dedicated to him, was built specifically for him back in 1968. And he's got a better memory than I do. So it's just amazing listening to him tell stories of things that they did back in the day and just how different things were when you couldn't just go online and like order whatever you need, right? It's like, oh, well, let's just have this overnighted in tomorrow. Guys literally had to go to junkyards to find things, and there just wasn't any kind of that aftermarket inventory like there is today. His story, and I'm not going to steal the thunder, but his story about the first ever set of 1432 tires is just hilarious because McCandless was the first guy that ever had a set, and that was like kryptonite, and just the way the whole thing came about. And so, and at that point, those guys could be match racing 3 or 4 times a week, right? I mean, the hot Chevys, the hot Fords, and the Thunderbolts and those things, and the Camaros, which were brand new at the time, and they were all out on the match race trail burning it up 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week. So they had a lot of opportunities to go out there and run. And when you're the only guy that has big tires, it's like, yeah, what time do you want to do this again? Dean Mink, 91 years old. He will be there. There's lots of very, very interesting stories that come out of the Hemi Challenge, and the cars are spectacular. It's worth just watching the parade or taking a walk through the staging lanes to look at those cars before they get out there and get in action, because you just walk by and, I mean, It's
They're
like,
beautiful.
oh, that's my favorite. Oh, nope, I like that one better. No, wait a minute, I didn't see that one.
My
And whether
favorite
you're a
course
dart
is fish
guy
sticks.
or a barracuda guy,
Yeah.
and I have to admit, I've always been a dart guy. I'm certainly not throwing rocks at the barracudas, but I've just always been a dart guy. When I was a kid, I knew some guys that had darts that they raced, and those things left an impression on me. So, but that's just one of the many, many, many reasons to go to Indy and spend a week there, not just go to the Indy and spend a day or two.
Yeah, and like I said, my favorite, they're so beautiful, and like my favorite course is the one Jason Lime was driving last year, Fish Sticks, and it's painted, it's not wrapped, and that's what I love about lots of these sportsman cars. They're not these wraps, they're just beautifully painted cars, and I appreciate that art of the cars. So yeah, it was fun. I watched that last year too. Very good fun to watch.
You mentioned the fish stick, like Tukey Hess, who's the guy who painted it,
Yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, he told me he had 2,500 hours in it. Now, if you think 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours is a year.
Wow.
If your work week is 40 hours, 2,000 hours is a year. But those guys, I mean, and believe me, they're not there 9 to 5. They're there from 6 a.m. until, if you get in a groove and you're feeling good about it, you just keep going, and you'll be there painting until 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, whatever it's going to be. One last thing in hot topics that's really not so hot, but it happened since our last show. The IHRA thing has taken another step with CTS and SpaceX AI filing suit against Daryl Cuddle and Durana. You can find it online if you want to find it. If it's a 40-page complaint. There are 10 points of contention that are all laid out. It's pretty damning if you read it, the things that they are claiming that Daryl and that Durana did. I would caution people, and this is kind of the stand I'm taking. That's one side of the story. I am going to reserve ultimate judgment until I see what the response is from Daryl and from Durana. I mean, obviously, the cash flow stopped, and that's been a big part of what shut down IHRA. Speaking of which, Maple Grove is now shuttered, at least for the meantime. There hasn't been any official announcement I've seen as far as change of ownership, as far as anything like that, other than I found it very telling. Sorry, I have a friend. I found it very telling that the post that was put online said Maple Grove Raceway is closed, at least for the time being, but no mention of Durana. It was Maple Grove's old colors, not anything green. So whether you could read anything into that as far as ownership change, as far as nothing officially has been said, but I thought, looking at that, I thought that looks like it could be a hint to something. But I also know, in reading the complaint, SpaceX AI and CTC, which is the land arm of SpaceX, most of those corporations, somebody owns the land, somebody owns a building, somebody owns a business, and that's just kind of broken up like that for legal reasons. But the complaint says that there was $800 million that was overbilled on a $1.4 billion contract. Now, I'm a do the math kind of guy. If you take all the zeros away on a $140 contract, that means you've been overcharged $80. Now, if I'm expecting something to cost $60 and it costs 62 or 65,
yeah.
Okay. If I'm expecting something to cost $60 and I get a bill for 140, somebody's got some explaining to do, and that explaining is going to take place long before 2 years go down the road. So that's one thing that kind of raises my eyebrows a little bit. The other thing, from having spent some time working in construction many years ago, certainly not in the management side, but I was close enough to it that I understand. You'll have a contract that says, okay, you're going to do this for me, and we're going to pay you $100. And it's very, very common in the contract for it to say, okay, now if you get it done by January 1st, there's going to be a $40 or $50 bonus, whatever, for getting things done in a hurry. There is usually some kind of an incentive to get that stuff done. Now, it has been widely reported that the Colossus computer project was expected to take and projected to take, all the experts in the field said this would be 2 to 3 years to build this machine and get it up and running. Daryl and his company had it operational in 122 days. Wow. So assuming that there would have been massive incentive for doing a 2-year project in 3 months, then that part of me has to wonder if some of the, hey, what's this extra $800 million would have been an incentive. Because if it's like, hey, get it done a week early, you get $10, get it done a month early, you get $50, get it done in 2 days, you get $1,000, that kind of money will add up in a hurry. So all I'm suggesting is wait until you hear the other side of the story. There will be, I'm assuming very soon, a response from Daryl and from Durana answering these charges or these accusations long before anything gets to court. And I definitely want to hear that side of the story before I really form an opinion. I mean, like I said, you read one side of it. You have friends that get divorced. If you listen to one of them, you go, you know what? Your spouse is the worst person in the world. And you listen to the other one and you go, yeah, that's not quite what I heard over here. And so let's make sure you get all the facts, I think, before you jump on or against anybody in the middle of this. I see we have somebody else has joined our studio chat. So why don't we take a minute? Why don't we hear from our friends at Weldon Pumps? And then why don't we come back and talk to a living legend right after this? Welcome back to the Alan Reinhart Show, and we go out to New Jersey into the museum, I believe is what it's called. Bob Frey, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yay!
Yes.
Wait for the applause to die down. Okay, it's down.
Full disclosure, when I was down in Cecil, Bob invited me to come by and see his memorabilia collection, his museum in the lower floor of his house. Absolutely spectacular, the amount of information that he has, the things that he's put together over the years, and some of the memorabilia that simply doesn't or didn't or no longer exists that Bob has put together over the years. It's just absolutely amazing. I hope someday you do, or somebody does, I don't know, a video or something, because some of that stuff that you have is just absolutely amazing. And I think it'd be cool if you could share that. But I know you probably don't want to have 10,000 people come over and trade for your house.
Sell tickets.
I could charge, yeah. That would cut down the crowd in a hurry, but that's pretty cool. I'm very blessed. And I know, Alan, when you were here yesterday, I had a tendency to drone on about some of the stuff a little bit longer than maybe I should. But there aren't a whole lot of drag racing fans that stop by Waterford, New Jersey, to get the tour. So I enjoyed showing it off. I'm very, very fortunate to have some nice stuff, and it's all like the culmination of what was a pretty good career for a guy with basically no talent or skills.
What's your favorite piece of memorabilia? I want to know that, because you have all this. Which ones you're like, this is like my glory?
Well, I can tell you it's not the picture of me naked from the waist up that your father has.
I was going to say I have it, and Jacob has it. I was going to say that's fine. There we go.
That's it. The strangest part about that was for the draw auction.
Yes.
Dave McClellan used to MC it. I hopped in, helped out a little bit, and somebody said, well, let's Bob and Dave would do anything for draw, and they'd sell the shirt off their back. And somebody hollered, well, let's sell the shirt off your back. So Dave and I both took our shirts off. Dave had open heart surgery a couple of months before, had a scar going from like his navel up to his neck, and he still looked better without a shirt on than I did. And I came home and I told my wife about the story, and I said, and we took our shirts off, and she said, so you were naked from the waist up in front of a lot of people? I said, yes, I was. She said, that's not a good look. I said, well, you're supposed to love me. She said, I do love you, but believe me, that's not a good look. And then
it was for good. It was for charity.
Yeah. And then some man came along and said he'd like to have that picture. And, we swapped pictures, and the rest is history. And unfortunately, you get to look at it.
My parents have it up in their shop. They just moved shop. They haven't put it back up yet. I'm like, oh yeah, you got to put that back up.
Stunning that it wasn't the first thing went back on their walls. But it's tough to answer your question. I said, what's my favorite, piece of memorabilia that I have? I have a lot of one-time only items that I was showing Alan yesterday. when the Jungle Gym Funny Car won the Winter Nationals in 1969, the first time they ran it at the Winter Nationals, the winning team got a nice big silver. It's actually like an ice bucket, but it's engraved with from Valvoline to the 1969 Winter Nationals Funny Car champion from Jungle Gym's team and Claire Sanders, and I have that, which is pretty cool. I've got the first national record sheet, official sheet that Don Garlett's ever set. I've got the first national record sheet from Ed McCulloch when he set the national record, became only the third funny car driver to set a record. I've got the shirt that Jack Christman wore in the winner's circle at the Winter Nationals in 1961. I was fortunate enough to obtain that from the Christman family, and just a lot of very interesting stuff. I mean, it to a guy like me that grew up around the sport, to have a lot of the things that I have, to be very blessed to have with it, to have that, it's just very cool.
Bob, one thing that I ask everybody that comes on the show, how did you get started? What set the hook? At what point in young Bob Frey's life did you go, wow, this drag racing stuff is pretty cool, I got to get more involved?
I've told the story, as you might imagine, several times, but in 1964, a friend of mine, Dan McIsaac, had a car, and he and his dad were going to go down to Atco to the drag races. Now, I'd never been to the drag races. I'd been to oval races and demolition derbies and things like that, but had never been to the drag races. And we got to Atco, and we started walking up to the track, and I saw the track was just one straight line. There was no circles or anything, and I thought, wow, this is going to be boring. And then when I saw the first two cars go down the track, I said, wow, this is really cool. And just as an aside, I remembered the first car that I saw go down the track was a 1962 Plymouth, had the name Hollywood Perkins on the side. And I told the story recently that I was never able to find out who drove that car for the longest time. And then, I don't know, a year ago or so, I was going through some of my records, and I had the entry list from the 1964 Nationals. I saw a car named Hollywood Perkins, and Ivan Allen Dieter was the name of the driver, and was from Wilmington, Delaware. So I figured, well, let me just try to track him down, see if he's still around. So I contacted Ivan and called him up, and I said, this is Ivan? I said, yes, it is. I said, this is Bob Frey. And of course, I was waiting for the Bob Frey. And yeah, he said, who? I said, okay. So I said to him, I said, you used to drive a car that had Hollywood Perkins on the side, right? And he said, yeah. I said, it was a 62 Dodge, right? He said, no, it was a Plymouth. I said, it was an automatic. He said, no, it was a 4-speed. I said, it was red and white. He said, no, it was black and gold. And I said, I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it was just right there, but finally tracked it down. But anyway, so we started going to the drags at Atco. And in 1966, we were there. Myself, my friend had a 65 Plymouth at the time, and my brother, and we decided we were going to make this great drag racing team. The three of us, we were going to be the next big thing in drag racing. So we all took turns driving the car to see who would have the best elapsed time. And I had the worst. So they figured, well, you're not going to drive the car. And then we got back in the pits, and the car was smoking. And my friend said, oh, go check and see what's causing the engine to smoke. And I couldn't find the hood latch to open the hood. So they figured, well, you can't drive, you can't be a mechanic. And at that time, they made an announcement over the PA at the track that Atco was looking for an announcer, because their announcer was going to be traveling, ironically, with the NASCAR drag racing team. And my two friends looked at me and pointed to the tower, and I went up to the tower and got started announcing, and knew right away that I just loved everything about it. It was very cool. So it comes from basically not being able to drive or be a mechanic. And as Alan knows, when it comes to things mechanical, I'm the worst.
Well, you're certainly not going to be a crew chief at any point in the future, but over the years, you have become the stat person, the go-to person. How did that start? Because yesterday I was very fortunate to see some of the records that you have, some of the old things that some of just the amazing lengths that you've gone to make sure that even if somebody says, what happened in 1967 in the second round at Indy, you have the right answer. What started that? What drove you to do that?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because people often ask me questions out of the blue. What happened to this? What happened to that? And when was the last time? Blah. And I say I may not know all of them off the top of my head, but I can pretty much go through the research and tell you. I mean, there are people out there, the Todd Vinny's, Kevin McKenna's, Bill Burgess's, know stuff off the top of their head. Admittedly, a lot more than I do, but I feel pretty proud that I can go back and pretty much track down the information, or in some cases, verify the information. But to answer your question, Alan, I was at one of our races, and I forget how long ago it was, but Cruz Pedregon was going to run John Force. And I mean to tell you, at that time, nobody at the track and the press, and there were a lot of press people following it, following John Force's team, following Cruz Pedregon's team, nobody could tell you how many times John Force and Cruz Pedregon had raced each other. And I thought that was criminal, because at that time, probably early 90s, whatever, two of the hottest drivers in the class. And I said, that's really unacceptable, that if we want to be treated as a major sport, that nobody can give you this information. And that's really what started. I started going back through old newspapers and national dragsters and race results, and started putting all the information together. So I now have, I believe firmly, the best collection, best records of NHRA national events that anybody has. I mean, I've got 73 drivers with their ETs and speeds that qualified or ran for Top Fuel at Indy in 1973, and it comes from a lot of research and a lot of searching around, trying to find different records and old newspapers. And I've been very fortunate that a lot of people that are around the sport have sent me old qualifying sheets and things of that nature. So I just think if NHRA drag racing in general wants to be treated as a legitimate sport, you should be able to have them. And of course, as it's evolved, I don't want to say I started, but from when I started my search, that basically a lot of the teams have PR people now. The National Dragster has a better history and file, and a lot of the stuff is pretty much accessible to a lot of people that want to follow the sport. But I think when I started it, like I said, the first thing I remember saying, wow, nobody can tell you who, Force and Pedregon raced. And we went to Indy one year, and I can't exactly remember the driver, but a guy had won Indy the year before and did not qualify the next year. And at that time, nobody could tell you when the last time that happened. And, occasionally, Alan, you'll be out doing a race or something and send me a note. Geez, Bob, when did this happen? When did that happen? And, I may not be able to answer all of them, but I can at least, get you pretty close on most of them. But I've enjoyed the search process, and especially since I retired, I have time on my hands, and I love tracking down racers and be able to acknowledge racers and put them in the record books where they may not have been in the record books before, and a lot of it comes from just groundwork, beating the bushes, going to the newspapers, and even calling information on 411, which I found out still exists.
It does.
That still blows me away. I think it's interesting, though, and again, for anybody that's come along in the last, I don't know, let's just say 20 years to pick a number, that listens to, whether it's the television announcers, whether it's the racetrack announcers, talk about, these guys have raced 17 times, or this guy's won 6 in a row, or this guy's done this and this. All of that stems from your database. But when you're putting it together, I wonder how many people realize that in the early days, Wally's mantra was the cars are the stars. So you would find a headline that says the surfers beat Stone Woods and Cook, but didn't say anything about who was driving the car. And you have been able to somehow go back and figure that out. Or they would say there was 28 funny cars that came to XYZ event. Here's a 16 that qualified, and not mention a thing about everybody that didn't. So when you're putting together career stats for okay, well, how many races has Nicole actually gone to? How do you go back and figure out legitimate numbers? And you've done it. It's just amazing to me.
It really is. And the fact that when they did used to run the stories in National Dragster, a lot of times, you're right, it would just be the name of the team, and that was a real flaw from the way that NHRA covered the races, because a lot of times a car would be entered under one guy's name. He would get credit throughout the race, and it was somebody else actually that drove the car. And the research to that has really been interesting. And a lot of times, you find one report that'll say, oh, Bob won, the other say Alan won when they ran each other. And so you need to go best 2 out of 3, I guess, to try to find. I have a lot of people will tell me I did this or I did that. And I really have to find ways to verify it. People remember differently, and over the course of the years, a lot of times, they think they went to the finals at the Winter Nationals, and it was really the World Finals in Pomona and stuff. So it's a real process, but it is interesting. Every time I find a new driver, I get to put somebody new on the list. Phil Burgess had asked me a while back how to do it, and I found the first race that Bob Glidden ever ran, the first race that John Force ever ran, and when I found the first race that Force ever ran, even his PR people didn't know that he ran that, But I found a little tiny picture in National Dragster of John Force going down the track, and ironically, the car was blowing up, as John had a want to do in the early days. And that was like in a National Dragster 2 issues after the race, but it verified that John was there. So it's a great process, Alan. I thoroughly enjoy it. You saw a lot of my books and magazines yesterday, and on my computer, I've got, I think at last check, 27,000 different stories that I have archived about different racers and things. And, I get 1 or 2 calls still a week or emails. Hey, my dad did this. We can't find any record of it. Or my grandfather, ran at, Ohio Valley in, 1967. Can you help us out? And I would say that in probably 99% of the time, I've been able to find answers and find results. And in some cases, if I have extra copies of National Dragster, I'll send the copies out to the people with their dad's name in the headline, and things like that, or a picture of their dad's car at the races. And it's really cool.
I think just recently, one that came up within the last, I don't know, less than 5 years, the Warren Johnson's first trip to Indy. And you reached out to me, and I called Warren, and he said, no, that's not the case. And then you did your research, and you called Warren and said, I have a picture of you. And he went, oh, well, yeah, I guess maybe I was there. So if you can't even believe the guy who's telling you the story, verifying it's got to be quite the chore.
Yeah, and Warren doesn't like being wrong either, So, but in all fairness to Warren, I just thought I'd keep him on the phone for a long while, just like in honor of a Scott Jeffrey on Burndown or something. I just sit there and wait for him to say something. But it's interesting. I a lot of times people call me, and Alan, you probably run into this a lot. You go to as many drag races now as anybody. And I run into guys, oh, yeah, I used to race at ATCO in 1965. We had a GTO. We ran in the 9s. That was pretty good GTO back in 1965, running in the 9s, And I just know I don't argue with people. If the guy wants to remember that and tell his buddies that he ran that, God bless him. I'm not going to argue and spoil his fun. But if it comes to the national events and the information that I'm trying to do, I will definitely verify everything. And even more so than the national events, Alan, every time you go to a divisional race, I'm usually sending you an update on them. I go back to 1961, and I guarantee I've got more information about guys that ran at those early divisional events back in 1961 than anybody. And that's a real process, because the reporting in national drags, so you think the national events was rough to follow or verify. You ought to go try and find some of that divisional stuff. It's amazing. And I always say this, and I've told Phil Burgess this at National Drag, so I told all the presidents of the company who I used to work for them, I said, it's criminal how bad the records were that NHRA kept back in the early days. I mean, both of the national events and the divisional events. And they would always say, well, we didn't think about keeping all this stuff. We just wanted to go out and race. And I said, well, the guys that played baseball in 1908 just wanted to play baseball too, but they got all the records from it. Somebody decided to sit down and keep all that in some record form. But the interesting thing about my stuff, Alan, is that when I started, I had to go back and go to all the old national dragsters, get the information, type them in manually. So all the qualifiers and all the round by round stuff, and pick up the mistakes that were in the newspapers and try to fix them out like that. And that was a lot of work. That's a lot of work. I know you worked, when you had your little stint there with IHRA, there's David Wesolowski, who works for doing their stats for them. He's done a marvelous job. He sent me a lot of the information that he has. And he's just done a remarkable job of going back and trying to find the history of that. And I was able to help him with some of the IHRA stuff, because I did the first 10 years that IHRA was in existence. I was the first main national event announcer and did that. So I was able to help him. But guys like him, it's amazing. They spend the time and effort to go back and look at the stuff and be passionate about it and care about getting it right.
Bob, most people probably don't. I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. I was just saying, make it more interesting. It's like you give fans more, with all your stats, give more reason to cheer for it. Because I'm like, if you know the odds and you know what's going on with them, and I still can't believe that that force stuff he must have found out. That was before Elon, because I can't believe Elon wouldn't know that. Because he's pretty good at keeping stats now too. He probably goes to you for advice.
I'm going to let that slide. It is interesting. The one thing I tried not to do, though, and I don't know if I mentioned with Alan yesterday, but just because you have a stat doesn't mean you get to use it. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily a stat. It's like the baseball now. Baseball stuff is just wacky. I mean, does the average baseball fan care about the launch angle, or the spin rate or the speed off the bat? I mean, I watch the Phillies. I'm a big Philadelphia Phillies fan. And, if Kyle Schwarber hits a home run and it went off the bat at 110 miles an hour, you still get one run, and I don't care about the launch angles. And there are different stats that used to come up. I mean, if a guy has raced at Pomona in 1990 and didn't race again until 2000, it's not a stat that he hasn't qualified for a race in 10 years. Yeah. He hasn't been to a race for 10 years, but it's interesting. And I do think some of the stuff, some of the information I have, head-to-head confrontations, how many times they ran, how many times this driver left first, how many whole shot wins, he has against its other driver, is all information I think that the people want to hear. Although you don't want to get too complicated, because a lot of people sitting in the fans don't know what a whole shot is. I hate to say it, but one of the biggest questions I used to get from the press people was, how come that guy ran 10 flat and the other guy ran 9 flat, but the guy that ran 10 flat won the race, so you try to break it down. That's one of the things I tried to do when I announced. I said I tried to entertain and inform and give the people some information that I think the casual fan sitting in the grandstand might not know. And if he knows what's going on, he'll be a little bit more educated and then a little more entertained and know what's going on with it. So that was the approach that I took, because I couldn't take any, I'm not telling you, that they sideswiped the clutch or, hacked out their louvered Finnegan pin or disarmed whatever they had in, because I couldn't do that stuff. So I just tried to, as the expression now is, tried to stay in my lane, announce what I could and try to entertain and inform.
It's interesting you brought that up, because like you and I and Lewis used to have this conversation quite a bit, and Bob Unkefer when he was involved, and about when do you actually use something. And I've always been a believer that if Nicole is about to win a race on her birthday, that once the light comes on, then I could tell everybody, hey, that was special milestone here. Look what just happened, as opposed to, in the second round saying, well, if Nicole goes the distance today, it'll be the first time she ever won on her birthday, which, one, I think you kind of steal the thunder from the moment. And two, if it doesn't happen, who cares?
Yeah, it's whatever you do, if she does win on her birthday, don't give out her age, Alan. That will not be a good thing.
Oh, no.
And it's never going to happen, because I can't drive. I'm an aggressive driver. So it won't happen.
Yeah, but you're right. And the baseball guys do that. I was watching the Phillies game last night. They had 2 men on, and the batter's up, and he goes, wow, if he gets a base hit here, he could knock in 2 runs. And I said, yeah, and if he strikes out, the inning's over. So those things used to just drive us crazy. I remember that, Alan, because sometimes you just want to get it in there in case it does happen. If it doesn't happen, you don't get to use it. So, but, everybody approaches things their own way.
Do you remember the first time that you traveled at someone else's expense to go announce a drag race, and what you were thinking, feeling at that moment?
I did. Now, I used to travel, do some races here locally for a couple of different tracks. You were at Cecil County. I worked at ATCO, and I don't know if traveling to Cecil County qualified or traveling up to Vargo Dragway or out to Maple Grove. But, when I started doing the IHRA races in 1971, they paid me to go down to Lakeland, Florida and announce their Winter Nationals. Actually, I'd gone the year before to do a race at Bristol, kind of like a test race, Larry Carrier. It's funny. People ask me how I wound up working with IHRA. And I tell them the honest to God truth. I sat down, wrote a letter. This is how old I am. I actually wrote a letter to Larry Carrier at IHRA and to Bernie Partridge at NHRA the same day, saying, boy, I'd like to come and announce your races. I think I've done a pretty good job. I can handle this, blah, blah, blah. And I got called back from Larry Carrier and said, I'd like to test you out. So come on down to Bristol. So I flew down to Bristol to do the first race, and then got hired full time to go and do their races starting in 71 in Lakeland, Florida. It was pretty cool, just getting traveled out, somebody paying you to go to do the races. The old expression, I would have paid them to let me go to the races, but you don't want to say that out loud. It was pretty neat, and I enjoyed that. And having done those IHRA races, I got to go to a lot of the small southern tracks that I wouldn't have gotten to if I worked just the NHRA races. A lot of the 8th mile tracks. I worked their Winston World Title Series, and got to know a lot of the race down there. I mean, Paul Smith, I met him very early in the years at Bristol and the tracks down there, and still have contact with him and still see him out there racing. So yeah, that's the first real big time. And I'll never forget, Ralph Hamilton was the fellow who's going to work with me doing the IHRA races. And we got to the gate at Lakeland, and things, this is 1971, so things are a little bit different as far as security and stuff. And the guy said, "Who are you?" And we said, "Well, we're the announcers." And he said, "Well, we've already got an announcer here, and he's the best in the business." And Ralph just leaned over and said, "Tell him this weekend he's number 3." And we drove in. So
Nice.
yeah. Ralph was a big guy. He could say that. I'd have gotten punched out, but.
How did you then transition to NHRA if you were the IHRA guy? Because obviously there was less animosity 50 years ago than there is in the current climate. But back then there was a lot of crossover between racers, but how did you make that crossover?
Well, first of all, I've got to correct you, Alan. There was more hostility between IHRA and NHRA back in the early 1970s than there is now. I mean, they were direct competition. They had worked together. NHRA hosted races at Larry Carrier tracks and everything. And it was really funny because I had worked at ATCO for years by the time I started working at the IHRA races, and knew everybody at NHRA. I did divisional races and things. But after that, it was almost like, I was the black sheep of the family. You weren't supposed to go to national, NHRA events and stuff. It was very fun. But anyway, to answer your question, after I stopped working at the IHRA races in 1981, I was still doing racing, traveling, doing some independent races. And then Mike Lewis had me working up at Maple Grove for a lot of their special events. For years, I'd done that. And then when he got the national event at Maple Grove in 1985, he called the NHRA guy and said, "I'd like to have Bob, work at my races." And that really turned out to be the big break to get to do the NHRA national events. And I mentioned this down at the Hall of Fame ceremony that Mike was a big factor in that, because he got me there, and Wally Parks was at that race, and Bernie Partridge was at that race. And it was so funny because after I announced it at the first ever Keystone Nationals in '85, Wally hung around and Bernie Partridge hung around at the end of the races, and they said, "Oh, Bob, you really did a good job. We'd like to have you work some more races with us." And and Wally, I'll never forget, he said to me, he said, referencing Larry Carrier, he said, "I got to tell you, Bob, I always appreciated your talent, but I was never crazy about the company you kept." And I just remember that it was interesting. Conversely, I worked the pro race at Tulsa in 1972, the National Challenge race, which at the time was one of the biggest thing in the sport of drag racing, which was basically sanctioned by AHRA. And Larry Carrier and Jim Fuller, his vice president, came out to Tulsa, and they were walking around the track, and Larry said almost the same thing to me about Jim Tice. He said, "Yeah, Bob," he said, "I'll tell you what," he said, "I was never crazy about Jim Tice, but apparently he's got a good eye for talent." So I thought the interesting combination what Wally said and what Larry said. So I was trying to keep both sides happy, and fortunately I was able to do it. So that went in probably making me the only guy that ever announced IHRA, NHRA, AHRA, and NASCAR drag races.
Yeah, I've got all but the NASCAR one. I've never done a NASCAR drag race. I can claim, however, that I was Brian France's Saturday night short track announcer before he became CEO of NASCAR. When he was the general manager of Tucson Raceway Park, he hired me to do his Saturday night first dirt, and then during his tenure, they paved the track. So I haven't been to a NASCAR drag race, but I've got a little bit of.
And probably won't.
Yeah, probably true.
Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was just going to ask, maybe is in the flow. I got to see you announce again this in Gainesville. You're down in Gainesville. You got to get back in the booth with Brian. And how did that feel, getting back in the booth? That was just one of my questions. Like, how'd that feel?
It was pretty neat, except for the ill-fitting jacket that they gave me. It's like,
yeah, a little big.
It's like I got that jacket from Big Hearted Jim's on South Street in Philadelphia. What are you? Are you 44 large?
It looks like a Lucas Steel deal.
Yeah, that's it. Alan and I worked at the Diamond P races, and one time we had to get new shirts, and there was one of the guys from Diamond P, Luis Castillo, got the 2 shirts, and Al and I are standing there next to each other, and he goes, I got a large shirt and a small now. Which one to use the large? And we looked at it and said, that's got to be a joke. I mean, but it was great. It was really cool being back there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The whole weekend was nice, getting to see a lot of the people. I mean, Jason does a marvelous job up there. Courtney Enders, I think, is wonderful. I mean, the stuff that she's done. So, everything, the world goes on. There's nobody's irreplaceable. And I never thought, when I left, oh my gosh, what's NHRA going to do? They're not going to have me there. And then Alan picked it up, and then, things go on. But they've got a great program going there. I just thoroughly enjoy listening to the group that they have doing it. And I actually told Evan Jonah, who supervises them, when I was down in Gainesville, that they've got a great group of people there. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy listening to Courtney. I got to spend some time with her and her sister Erica when I was down there in Gainesville. In fact, I took a couple of the old trading cards I used to have from when the girls were running the junior dragsters, and I took them with me down there. They had signed them a long time ago to me, and it was just good to get to see both of them. I told Courtney, I said, being your connection with the Elite Motorsports, you do a marvelous job up there in the PA of handling the connection between them and the KB team cars. Nobody would, if they didn't know you were involved with the Elite team, they wouldn't know by the way you announced. So, but it was fun being there. Got treated very nicely. It's always nice to come back and be there and get to see a lot of people. I did not get to see as many people as I would have liked. I was walking by Dallas Glenn's Pro Soccer, and he said, Bob, remember when you came and you did the little bit about me, on NHRA Today? And I was rushed because I had to go do an on stage thing and didn't even get a chance to stop and talk to him more about it. But it was fun. It was really just great. And just to watch the way that they have, seamlessly made the transition and have a great group of people doing it now was very cool.
Let's just for a minute put a pause on the tire smoke and racing gas. How about Bob Frey, wrestling ring announcer?
What?
I did.
Nice.
I did. It was so funny. When I worked at the radio station in Hamilton, little small town next to where I live now, wrestling entertainment came to a lot of gyms and arenas in our area, and they asked me if I wanted to be the ring announcer. And of course, in New Jersey, everything is litigated. You got to have licenses and everything for it. So I had to file for a license, and I guess there wasn't a real big call for it because my Jersey ring announcer's license number was 6. So apparently there weren't a whole lot of people in it. But so I did the wrestling. I've always been, I know it's a wacky thing, I've always been a big wrestling fan. And back there, Blackjack Mulligan and Pedro Morales and Gorilla Monsoon and all those, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. I knew all of those people. And they enjoyed the job I was doing. And at that time, they used to go to the arena in Philadelphia and tape their shows. It was like some of these sports back then. The NBA was on tape delay, and the wrestling was, they taped 3 shows in a row. And they said, we'd like you to come up there and see if you would be interested in, joining our team. So I went up there and I did some stuff with them for the 3 shows. And I came out and I'm saying, I need a sign. I really love the drag racing stuff, but I need a sign if I should go and transition and do the wrestling things. And I came out, my car had been stolen. So I figured that's a sign. Probably shouldn't do that, but I would have loved that. In fact, when the WWE, Jerry Tolliver and his group came sponsoring some cars a couple of years ago, I just had a ball with them, with the Undertaker and The Rock and all those people. I've got a picture of me here in my room that I installed yesterday of me and Hulk Hogan, and he's got me in a headlock and everything. Nice. It was interesting. I also auditioned for horse racing. I used to love the horse races and still do. And we had a great racetrack here in southern New Jersey, Garden State Park. And I went up there and the same thing. I did a couple of races, and the guy who was booking all the people said, we'd like you to come down to our Florida track. And we run Hialeah, and we'd like you to come down there and be our horse racing announcer. And I thought that was pretty cool. I'd been married, I think maybe a year at the time. And they said, well, it's a 90-day meet, but with holidays and weekends off, it's 4 months. You'd have to come down there and be with us for that whole time. And I didn't think my lovely bride would appreciate me coming home and telling her I'm going to be in South Florida for 4 months and you keep the home fires burning. So I didn't become a wrestling announcer and I didn't become a horse racing announcer, but I love them both and still do.
Very
And you still have the wife, so I think you made the right choice there. I think that was definitely
I have everything.
Let me-
I don't have anything from the horse racing. I got some wrestling stuff, but I don't have anything from the horse races.
well, I could. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking, what would you collect if you went to the horse races? What would you want to bring home? And then
A horse?
that had me think of
yeah.
this picture of a cow that you had to take
Yeah,
one
yeah,
time.
that's
We'll stay.
if we had a visual, all of a sudden it would make Nicole's dad's picture of me look like a Rembrandt.
Which, by the way, I think you need to put out the challenge that Jason and Lone should maybe do that at this year's draw auction. Being like, we did it, now you guys got to do it.
I think they should do it. You know why I say that? Because I won't be there to look at it.
Well, there you go. They made me wear a dress on the starting line one year, which wasn't exactly my shiningest moment either. But
I wore a tiara in Texas the weekend that they had a 3-star general who was going to present Tony Schumacher with a big award. And I thought I should probably warn him ahead of time. And I said to him, I said, General, I just want to let you know that during the pre-race, I'm going to be wearing a tiara. And he said, you're wearing a what, boy? I went, oh, okay. So I told him that. But no, the draw stuff, I mean, there's some pictures of me in some hideous outfits that we did a lot for draw and raised a lot of money for them. But there were some good times.
Yes, good times.
Bob, I could never come up with just one if somebody put me on the spot, so I'm not going to do that. But if you have maybe a couple or three or something, things that you got to do, people you got to meet, things you got to experience because you were in this job and traveling around and doing that, like you have to look back and go, man, I would have never had a chance to do that if I hadn't got involved with the racing.
No, I probably wouldn't have had a chance to interview The Rock and The Undertaker, who came out with the WWE stuff. And I remember when we went to the WrestleMania that was held at the pond in Anaheim, and The Rock was there. And back then he used to have a big thing. He would ask somebody, said, what do you think about? And as soon as they'd start answering, he'd go, it doesn't matter what you think. So he came to the pond, and we had the WWE cars there, and the one had The Rock on it. And I said to him, I said, Rock, what do you think about this wrestling and racing thing together? And he started talking. I said, it doesn't matter what you think. And the whole crowd just burst from laughing. It was great. But I said, I've traveled around. I've been to 5 countries and 2 continents doing races, and just been very fortunate to meet a lot of the people. I mean, I would not have gotten to be able to meet Don Garlitz and sit in his inner sanctum, or do John Force's very first TV show before the one that he later did. I was there with Kenny Rogers and Don Perdome. We sat there. I've sat and had lunch with Carol Shelby when I was doing a special event that he was being honored at. But the whole thing of getting to watch the drag racing legends, who, like, when I first went to 1964 at ATCO, started watching these guys, and to think that I'd be able to call them up at home or talk to them or call them friend or have some of their memorabilia in my house. I mean, that was all very cool. I mean, I loved everything about it. I mean, when I retired, I didn't complain about anything. I was treated very well. NHRA treated me great. I didn't even mind the traveling at the time because it was just part of what we did. Like, Alan, you travel, and
Sure.
So I enjoyed everything about it. So it was just very blessed to have done that. I've been to Saskatchewan, Canada, Mexico City, over in England doing the races there, and it's funny. I really enjoyed going to a lot of the smaller tracks when I was doing the NHRA Today show. I used to go there and probably be the highest ranking NHRA official that went to some of these tracks. And it was just a kick. I got a letter today from the Saskatchewan Raceway where I was, and they're having a reunion. They'd like me to go up there and go back there. I've been to Medicine Hat, Alberta, and I've been to Mexico City and Edinburgh, Texas, and it's just been a blessing. I mean, there are just so many things that I've been fortunate to be able to do and say that I've done because of the sport of drag racing.
You mentioned Don Garlitz's Inner Sanctum, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, and I think that the fans that are watching will find this interesting. All of the years that you were the MC for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame ceremony down in Florida, which, of course, that's Don Garlitz's Hall of Fame as part of his compound down there in Ocala, he never paid you for that. It was always a trade-off. and there was always some kind of negotiation for something he had that you wanted. And how bad did he want you, and how bad did you want whatever it was that you were negotiating for? Give me one or two of those. Those are just outstanding stories.
Well, first of all, the people at NHRA now are going, we could have traded Frey for something instead of paying him. Yeah, way to go, Alan. You know.
Well, you're retired now. I mean,
it's
it's
great.
over.
Yeah, it was great because I never asked to be paid for the Hall of Fame thing. I mean, that, you know, let's put that out front. Don and I just kind of came to an agreement one year, and, you know, I said, Don, I'll just, you know, pick something out of your collection here to have. And so the two of the most interesting things, I told him I'd like to have a Don Garlits trophy in my house. So he walked into his office, and Alan, you've been there. It's got a big, long counter there that's got a lot of effects. It's got him and his picture with Richard Nixon in the White House there, and a lot of special things. And he walks all the way down to the end of the table, and he's got a big bronze sculpture there of the blowover that he had at Englishtown. And I'm standing right behind him, and he's looking at that, and he's going, see this? He said, this is the sculpture they made of me when I had to blow over at Englishtown. And I'm sitting behind him going, oh, I'm going to get the sculpture. And he goes, you can't have that.
Oh.
So he moves over a little bit to the right, points to a little tiny trophy that's on the shelf. You know, it's your old classic shelf that's, I'm sorry, I just had something blink on my computer. I don't know. There, okay. A little tiny plastic trophy with the girl's victory on it. And he points to a car on his picture. He goes, that's the 36 Ford. That's the first car I ever drove at the drag strip. And this is the first trophy that I ever got. And I think, wow, I'm going to get the first trophy that Don Garlits ever got. You can't have that. Jeez. So I told him I'd go out into the room, pick a trophy, and I'm going to start like a bumping process. If I find one that I like better than the other one. So I went on the whole thing, and I wound up getting a 1957 trophy that he won at the Florida State Championships, and he wrote a whole thing out about it, and, you know, verified that he won that trophy. And so I've got a 1957 Don Garlits Top Fuel trophy, which not a whole lot of people can have. And then on the other side of that coin, one year I was walking around and I saw a poster from Half Moon Bay drag strip, and for whatever reason, I'd never been there in my life, but Half Moon Bay just had such an aura to me. When I was in the service, my roommate who lived out in California used to race out at Half Moon Bay. I used to read all the reports from it. And next to Lions, it might have been the most famous track out there on the West Coast. So he's got a poster there of Don Garlits being at Half Moon Bay. And I said, Don, I'd like to have that poster there. Well, you know, I really like that. There aren't a lot of them around. I said, but okay, you can have it. So he gave me the poster, and it was sealed. You know, I couldn't open it up there. So I got it and came back home, and I finally cut the seal off the top and opened it up and found out it wasn't an original poster. It was printed on Kodak paper. It was a reproduction, and you could buy those things on eBay for $4.99. So somewhere between his 57 Top Fuel trophy and a $4.99 poster. I used to love doing the Don Garlits Hall of Fame. Let me tell you, you ask about things that I couldn't have done without drag racing. I mean, I did that for probably over a decade and thoroughly loved it. It was probably the biggest social gathering for people in drag racing. Everybody that was anybody was there, and to be up on the stage, it was really great. Now, having said that, I wish there were a couple of times when I had a hook that I could have gotten some people off the stage, but that's a whole other story for another day.
Yeah, they get kind of long there some nights. You're just like,
oh boy.
Well, you were notoriously famous for telling many people that were not polished public speakers, when they would come to you and say, can you give me some advice? I've got to do this straight. And you make it short, get to the point, get it done, get out of there.
I said, nobody wants to be the guy. And they said, what do you mean the guy? I said, the guy at the end of the night goes, well, that guy sucked. You know? Yeah. I still think to this day, the best acceptance speech was Warren Johnson. Warren got up there on the stage and he said, in keeping with everything else in my life, I'm going to keep this short. And he walked off the stage. And I went, best acceptance speech ever.
Well, you also always were famous for saying you never wanted to be the last story on the news.
Yeah. I did so many. It's like when people ask me a lot of times, hey, Bob, come on, take my car out for a spin, drive this car. I mean, I went to at Las Vegas, a Cobra convention, and a guy came up with an original 427/65 Cobra. I mean, a real honest to goodness car. And he said, Bob, just take my car for a spin out there on the racetrack. And I went, oh no. You haven't heard my story about Atco in 1965 when I was trying to drive the car. I said, no good can come from me driving your car. I said, all I can do is whack it, you hit something, and wind up the final story in the news. And finally tonight in the news, drag racing announcer Bob Frey crashed a $1 million Cobra out there today. Now let's go check the weather. But nope, don't want to do that. Yeah.
Saying don't let me in the car. I'm good.
That last guy on the news is never, and finally Bob won the Nobel Peace Prize. No, that ain't gonna be it.
It's good if everybody knows their limitations. Do what you can do and do it as best you can.
Is there anything you missed in your career and your stuff? Is there ever a thing that you're like, boy, I sure wish I'd something?
Yeah, there is. I wish I'd been at some of the Southern California tracks back in the '60s when they were racing. I never went to Half Moon Bay. I never went to Lions Drag Strip. I said in my drag racing career, the thing that I think I missed most was not being able to be part of that original Southern California, explosion of drag racing. And I have the U.S. Air Force to thank for that, because I joined the Air Force in 1965, volunteered during the Vietnam War to go into service. That's how bright I am. But we're down in Texas, and we were finishing up on technical school. And they said, where would you like to go? And I figured, well, I lived in New Jersey. It's the height of drag racing and the Beach Boys and everything out in California, surfing and everything. I said, I'd like to go to California. And they sent me to New Jersey. And then for the next 4 years, I worked at McGuire Air Force Base, worked at Atco Dragway, never missed a race in all the years that I was in the service. But yeah, I missed being at some of the myriad. I mean, there were 30 drag strips in Southern California, but I would like to have been able to go to the Lions or to Orange County or Half Moon Bay or some of those tracks out there. That's the one thing I really think I missed in my drag racing career.
I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out yet, but one of the stories up on Bobby's side on Comp Plus right now is a flashback to Bill Donor and the 64 Funny Cars days and some of the just wild stuff they used to do out there. That's something that I've really missed, but I've been fortunate, as I know you have, to sit down with Bill and talk to him about some of the stuff that, one, the philosophy that made, two was the, damn the torpedoes attitude, right? It's like, we'll do it. If we get arrested, we'll explain it later.
I think the funniest part about that was when they used to line up all those cars out there and then start them up and everything. And it might have been Prudhomme or something, but one of the big time stars told me one day, he said, you know what? All we're doing is burning nitro out there, and they got all those cars out there, and nobody's going to notice if we're not fired up. So just get out there. And he told the guy, just shake the body so it looks like it's, running or something like that. And I thought that'd be good until one night when all 64 guys got the same idea.
Yeah,
64 funny cars running, all these bodies shaking, and no noise. But that's just me.
That will suck the fun out of your cackle fest in a hurry. Bob, you've been more than generous with your time tonight. I asked you for 30 minutes, and you've been here. We're sneaking up on an hour now. I just wanted to thank you for taking the little walk down memory lane, and I really, really do appreciate it. I know that a lot of fans still ask what happened, where you went, what are you doing? I know when you originally retired, you had told me that you were looking forward to getting into the grandkid business because you had 6 grandsons, and you had attended exactly no soccer games, no school plays, no recitals, no anything, and that you wanted to get back and be able to take some time with that. And I know that you've enjoyed some of that. But what keeps you busy these days? Because now those guys are up and like having lives of their own, and probably not going to quite as many, soccer games or little league things anymore.
Well, I want to preface everything by saying I'd never been to a soccer game in my life. So call me crazy, not a big soccer fan. But anyway, yeah, I used to be able to play basketball with all my grandsons and beat them playing horse. But now they're out there jocking up 3-point shots from 35 feet, and I'm getting a hernia doing a layup, so we don't do that much anymore. We do play some golf. I enjoy that. I enjoy spending some time. I still do the stats for the TV shows. I mean, I provide, I shouldn't say all the stats, but, I provide information on every racer that's going to run in the top 4 pro classes, the alcohol classes, and the pro mod. So like going into Indy, that's, 7 classes worth of, 16 guys apiece. That's a lot of people to write. And I give them all the stats there, how many times they ran the race, what their best ETs are, how many rounds they've won, and blah, blah, blah. And And it's not so bad when, like now, between Seattle and Brandon, you have a couple of weeks off. But when they start running those things back to back, it becomes just a little time sensitive. You're trying to finish up the one race and then get ready for the next race. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of research. Probably don't get out and walk and exercise as much as I should. But when I'm out on the golf course, I get a lot of time chasing my balls in the trees. You were here, Alan. You saw what the trees are like around here. That's what our golf course is like. And if you don't hit it right down the fairway, you're trying to track down the next ball. But it's nice. It's a nice life. I'm very blessed. My wife and I spent 50 years married this year, and just very fortunate. I've been a very fortunate person in life to have a good job, a good gig, do something I like. I paid well for it. Loved every moment of it. I can't say that there was anything that I did about it, or that I had to do about it, that I didn't care for. So I've just been very blessed. I'm just a very lucky guy. Now, if I could just get hold of that picture that Nicole's father has and burn it, life would be good.
Sorry about that. I had to bring it. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Just because you mentioned playing horse with your grandsons, you very famously one time played horse with, was it Tom Hammonds? It was a NHRA Today thing, and he's walking in going, I'm playing him, and then you had him sweating in his sneakers there for a bit.
We did two things. We did that with Tom Hammonds, who was just a wonderful guy, just a great racer, probably the best basketball player I'd ever seen, and he was like a seventh or eighth man on the team. And I told him I could block his 3-point shot, and he said I couldn't. He shot the ball from the corner. I threw another ball up. It hit his, and mine went into the net, which was a nice thing. And then we played at George Minell's house one night. I don't know if you were there or not, Alan, when we used to go to Las Vegas, and Larry Nance was there, and we played a game of horse, and I drop kicked one in from about half court because I could make them once out of every 30 times or so. And he was amazed at that. And I gave him a letter, and then he went and dunked 2 hands over his head, and I got a letter. So, it was fun. I was not a bad athlete as a kid, surprisingly enough. And I was up in Seattle one time playing with a couple of the guys in the alcohol class, and throwing me footballs, and I'm getting them and throwing them behind my back and stuff. They were amazed. So I used to love playing sports, any sports except soccer.
All those great little moments from the road over the years. It just, it's quite a ride. Bob, again, I can't thank you enough for all the time. You've been more than generous, and I appreciate the time yesterday. And again, you canceled he bailed out on his golf game yesterday to spend a little bit more time so he could give me some more detail and some more, show me around just the amazing collection of things that he has. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's been a genuine pleasure working with you all these years, being able to call you a friend all these years, and then being able to catch up right here where everybody else could follow along with us. It's really been special. Thank you.
Thank you. And oddly enough, Alan, the golf guys never called and told me they missed me yesterday.
You must play about like I do.
In fact, one of them called and said, can you send your sub again next week? No, thanks very much. I appreciate what you and Nicole doing for the show. Grant, I thank you for being the part of it here for tonight.
Thank you so much, Bob. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure, because I'll need an update on my stats for the race this weekend.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Oh my gosh, great to hear from you.
I knew that was going to be fun. I don't know that I knew it was going to be that kind of fun. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We've got some more stuff to do to finish up the show, but let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
QuarterMileClassifieds.com is a new and easier alternative to online classified advertising. We make it a simple experience with $20 getting your car, hauler, engine, or parts listed for 2 weeks. If you want to make a bigger splash, we have VIP listings that provide even more exposure, including social media. On QuarterMileClassifieds.com, you get up to 10 photos of video and up to 2,000 characters to deliver the message you need to make the sale. QuarterMileClassifieds.com is a trusted classified ad partner of Competition Plus and the Roof Tech Comp Eliminator Bonus Fund. Visit QuarterMileClassifieds.com.
Charge forward, break boundaries, keep winning. No matter what you drive, count on peak performance, designed to defy any weather condition. Because we're built for those who demand more. When you peak, you win.
All right, Nicole, since I was traveling today, you're the one that was in charge of putting together the itinerary. What's next?
Oh, man. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'm like, now you're actually calling me out on stuff. We have the Ask the Announcer. Have you gotten any good Ask the Announcer questions in recently?
You know what? Actually, I've been on the road all week. I haven't done any of that. So if you've got a question, shoot it to me. Ask the Announcer cptv@gmail.com, and I will find an answer for you. We'll get to that next week. I was having so much fun talking to Bob. I was afraid we were going to keep him past dinner, and then Diana would be mad at me, and I didn't want that. So
no, never wake the white man. Next up, we have the viral video presented by the Competition Plus store, where you can get all those cool vintage shirts. We just came out with the Dean Scusa. We have I'm trying to
the new
remember
Mongoose shirt, the
yeah,
Mongoose shirt,
Mongoose
right?
shirt. So there we go.
Yeah, there it is.
That is such.
There it
I
is.
still love that one. The English leather, and of course, love Pat Busey. Oh my God, bucket list. If you never met Pat Busey, meet Pat Busey. Him and my dad, when they get together, absolutely crack me up. You son of a bitch, you know, blah. So Pat Busey, just
I may put him on the hit list to get him on the show one of these days, because I genuinely enjoy talking to him as well.
Yeah,
Scotty Cannon.
That's they are so beautiful back in the day. I mean, the Corvette top, and there's the one. I just love that one. And like we said, never a normal guy. I never saw.
No.
And we got the Heritage Series cars. So yes, we got
all those shirts and more can be found on the Competition Plus store. The infamous white wagon. Yes, RMS, 4-time world champions from down in Texas.
Yeah.
Speaking of, the Rare, Morris, and Shepard were the 3 guys from Texas, right? Did you see that the drummer for ZZ Top passed away?
Yes, Beard. Yes, I did see that.
Yeah.
Ironically, I always thought it was, I'm like, oh, so his last name's Beard, and he's the only one without a beard. Okay.
Yeah. Well, every time I think of 3 guys from Texas, Rare, Morris, and Shepard is the drag racing 3 guys from Texas, and ZZ Top, obviously, are the musician 3 guys from Texas going
that makes sense.
way, way back in time.
Yeah. So for the viral video, we're actually going to air our quick Night Under Fire movie trailer. This is on YouTube, and it's so worth the watch. This is, behind the scenes stuff you're not going to see with the Bader family putting on the Night Under Fire, which was their biggest event of the year. I think it's even busier than the Norwalk Nats. So, Jacob, if you want to roll that.
This is 40,000 people coming to your house to hang out with you and enjoy some drag racing, and it's just, they deliver. They know how to deliver. They've been doing this for 49 years. So everything that the Bader family stands for is built into this foundation here at Summit Motorsports Park. It's just the mass, the sheer number of people that attend this event. It's so different. They are so engaged and so tied into their drivers. They love them so much, and the access that is afforded to them here at Night Under Fire is just amazing. Bill Bader is the greatest showman in drag racing, and so when you have the greatest showman moniker, you have it's such a high bar.
My brother is just off the charts. He won't fail. His mindset is, I can do it, which maybe that came from our dad. I don't know, because I have the same I can do anything attitude.
We don't ever stop. We keep going and going. When the odds are against us, we find a way or make a way.
We have a horrible forecast tomorrow night. The forecast sucks. I don't know that we're going to be able to. And I want to be the guy that can figure out how to navigate that. We're going to give it hell.
Yeah, if you've not watched it, it's incredible. And the link is provided.
If that is not the biggest, most entertaining single-day drag race event on the planet, somebody tell me what you think is, and we'll argue. But no, what Bill does and has done for all the years. And the amazing thing is, as big and special and wonderful, he still keeps finding ways that next year's going to be better, and next year's going to be better. He makes sure that it just never gets stale. And Yeah, he is definitely the modern day Bill Donor. When Bill used to get out there, all the funny cars and all the crazies and all the just lunatic things that you can't imagine. Just but fans just, you come in, you see a show, you get entertained for 3 hours, 4 hours, and then you go home going, wow, I can't wait to see the next one. Like I say, I don't believe there's anybody in the business better than Bill Bader right now. And
Barnum and Bailey.
Crazy.
And then next we have That's Strange, presented by Strange Engineering. And this
here's one that I'm guessing a lot of people may even never knew existed. The Sidewinder funny car from SCS Gearbox. SCS Gearbox was a company that was involved with Don Garlitz when he built the Sidewinder dragster way back in the day, because obviously, chain drive ain't going to do it. It's got to be gear driven in some way, and you can't use conventional rear end. You can't, with everything kind of going the same direction. So SCS was instrumental in building the gearbox that Don used in the dragster. That car, by the way, you can still see at the Don Garlitz Museum. It's on display. This funny car was built, and I don't know that it ever ran at an official event. I can't tell you that I ever saw it run at an official event. We should have asked Bob while he was on the show, because he would have known that.
You would know.
But I believe they took this thing out, did some testing with it, and decided that, maybe that's not as good an idea as it seemed on paper. But there's no question about it. That fits the description for That's Strange, brought by our friends at Strange Engineering. Rears, gears, axles, brakes, all made in the USA. Don't just race.
You don't need no script. You know it all by heart.
I know that one. I'm still waiting for them. They need to send me a new banner for my shop, because my banner that I had up there for the last 14, 16 years kind of aged out. So by the way, I want to tell Corey Lee sent me a note last week, and he said, hey, you need to take your glasses off your hat. Nobody can read what your hat says, and if you're going to be selling merch, people got to know what your hat says. Well, I will tell you two things. I'm not selling merch. This is kind of a private inside joke, but FRS stands for First Rate Service, as far as you know. And I took my glasses off. So, okay, Corey, I listened. See, I listened.
Yeah, he does listen now, sir. And then we have the Good Old Days Throwback, presented by Redline Oil.
Well, we were talking about Donor, his 64 funny car shows. This is a story that's up right now on Competition Plus, and that was spectacle. This was the Night Under Fire 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when they would have literally 64 nitro burning funny cars come into Seattle, and it was just a rollicking nonstop nitro show. Back in the day when you'd run these cars, pack the chute, fill it with gas, maybe do a leak down test, change the oil, and send them again. You didn't need to have an hour and a half in between runs. And Bill Donor just did some of the wildest, craziest promotional stuff and put on some of the biggest, best, crazy shows. And again, the whole story you can read right now on competitionplus.com. What might have been, and if I'm going to have to talk Ed McCullough into coming on the show one time so he can tell the story. But what might have been one of the all-time great Bill Donor things, one of his 64 funny car shows, he had a young lady, brought in a special young lady to be the trophy girl, the trophy presenter, a lady by the name of Linda Lovelace, who was very famous back in the 1970s. that was Bill Donor going, how can we do that? What can we do that nobody's ever done before that people will be talking about on the way home? And that certainly did it. Yeah.
Jacob, do you have my throwback picture by chance? I sent him a throwback picture for Brainerd. I don't know if he has it. There we go. Check that out.
There you go.
Coming up for Brainerd. This is what used to be called the North Star Nationals. Yeah. Yes, that is me up front with a little halter top my mom actually made for me for Solid Clark. My brother, I don't know if you can see, is wearing his Showtime shirt. His good old Showtime shirt. So yes, this is my throwback picture as we get ready to go up to Brainerd for the race this weekend. Good old Winston. Remember when we used to have Miss Quaker State, Miss Winston, and stuff like that? Yeah, and then this was, I can't remember. I was in high school, so this is a little bit more. So yeah, so another, Miss Quaker State there. I think it was the same one. Yeah. So it was our top alcohol dragster, family dragster that we won a couple times, and we'd host a party. I didn't send pictures of that with Rick Johnson, and so yeah, this is my throwback picks for the week.
Very cool. Very cool. It's like heartbreaking that you're not going to be there.
I know. And Mary, same thing. Our friend Mary, Crazy Mary, everybody's like, you two aren't going. But like I said, actually, when I'm done here, getting ready for the party, our BIR party I'm making, oh my God, I'm making pierogies. I'm making deep fried cheese curds. I'm making me.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better have cheese curds or it won't be a Brainerd party.
I was going to say Minnesota sushi, which is our pickle, cream cheese, corned beef things, and paprika. So we're not going. So Mary and I are making the best of it, and we vowed we're not going to miss next year. And like I said, I was even talking to Sarah Walker, who's the GM, this morning about everything they're doing to get ready, and everybody's invading today. So yeah, I'm very sad I'm not going. But you're going to be here soon, and we are going to have a night at Rick's Boatyard. Better put me down for that. I'll get the first round even.
All right. I'm looking forward to that. You know, Brainerd is also the only place that I've ever seen good ass beer.
I've never even heard of that one.
That's the name of it. The liquor store next to the hotel where we stayed for years and years and years. And anybody that knows me knows I'm a cold beer at the end of the day kind of guy. So I would always go over and get a 6-pack just to go put in the hotel fridge. So when I come back from the races, no matter what time it is, I have a beer in the room. And they had good ass beer. That's what it said. I never tried that because I'm a tried and true Budweiser guy. I'm still hoping to get, some kind of a corporate sponsorship deal from them. But, just a product deal would be good for me. That'd put me in another tax bracket. But
I know all the boys are going to load up on the Michelob Golden because even though it's made in St. Louis, you can only buy it in Minnesota, the Michelob Gold Draft Light. And I actually have some at home, which I'll have. And I should have sent for my other one, me with the bear, Ham's Beer Bear. Because Ham's Beer, another one for the great white waters, they called it. Yeah. So yes, I'll serve some of that too because they're selling it again. It's making a resurgence. And yeah, because I had a great picture with me and Jody Moats because she was my track best friend, me and Jody Moats. So yeah, good times.
Very cool.
Good times. So.
Well, I wish Christy and everybody in Brainerd good weather and safe racing. I hope you guys have a fabulous event up there. I hope the same for us. I'm going to be in Epping at New England Dragway. If you're in the neighborhood up here this weekend, we'll be out there doing a divisional deal. So won't be quite as big a party as they're having in Brainerd, but the on-track action should be fun. And I believe this is the last event in Division 1 this year. So there's going to be some championship stuff that's going to be decided, things in the Lucas Oil Drag Racing Series. But pleasure for me to be here. And then I get to go home and swap suitcases and head to your place because looking forward to it. Really appreciate Jacob for running everything, taking care of stuff behind the scenes. A very, very sincere thank you to Bob Frey for taking the time yesterday to give me the tour of his museum and all of his memorabilia, and for being so gracious with his time today, sharing some stories and giving everybody a little behind the scenes view of a guy that I know that a lot of fans still miss listening to out there right now. So thank you to Bob. And Nicole, as always, it is my pleasure to spend a little time with you every other Wednesday. We'll do it again a couple of Wednesdays from now.
Yeah. I
guess we'll be doing it from somewhere in Indy, and we'll figure out who will be the next victim. Guess the next person on the hot seat. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Alan Reinhart Show. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Reliability to drive thousands of miles. Confidence for those who fly high. Redline oil products give you the power to crush the competition. And a track record of being the best. Redline oil products. You push it to the limit, we'll protect it.